Well, thank you, Livia, thank you, Marcel and Edith, for for this invitation, for this talk and the show and all the conversations that we had in between. That I think were very interesting and productive. So I was about to present myself, basically saying the same things that Livia already said. So. Just adding something that my work has a collaborative platform for certain projects like the publishing projects and curating films, because I also show archive films and films from artists and filmmakers I admire. But then I reserve like a more introspective process as a visual artist and as a researcher, independent researcher. So, and this is the case for this project that I presented here at Favorite Spectres of Art. And the installation name is Ntimbe Caetano, which is a slogan in Makonde language. That means let's crush, smash Caetano, let's kill him, let's finish with him. So Ntimbe Caetano, I like very much this slogan because it has this quality of, because you can't understand it really well, you have to try to decompose it to get to know better. And as you try to decompose it, you understand more elements of the context I'm working on. So Makonde language, who is the Makonde people? Why are there in this project? So the Makonde people are a tribe, and this tribe lives in the north of Mozambique. And as you know, tribes don't respect the borders defined by the countries. So this tribe lives in the north of Mozambique, as I was saying, but also in Tanzania and in Kenya, and they form a community. And what happened is, like in 1960, Julius Nyerere achieved independence for Tanzania because it was a colony from the UK, and before that from Germany, as you know. But in 1960 they had the independence. So the Makonde people that lived in the border, across the border in Tanzania, had first the experience of being free. And they communicate this impression, this movement actively for the people that stayed in Mozambique. So they wanted to come to Mozambique and rule their own land, as they were able to do already across the border. So this means that because of their activism, because these new ideas, the war against the Portuguese started, and in 1964, and in 1974 in Europe we had a liberation of a fascist state in Portugal because of this exactly war, because who liberated Portugal from fascists were the same that were fighting in Africa. So when we start talking about Makonde people, we are just at the start of a process that had consequences in my own country, in Portugal, till today. So again, Ntimbe Caetano, let's crush Caetano. Caetano was the last prime minister of Portugal, here following the Salazar. And his name is Marcelo Caetano, actually. But of course, this slogan identifies it as the enemy. And the enemy was represented by him, and he represented fascism and colonialism. And of course, it's also a slogan with the language of war. It's an impulse, motivation for people to engage on a violent state against something. And as I was saying, it's a language of war, but I also feel that It's where the language of war meets a language of choreography, for example, because there's always this problem of putting several people all together towards a goal, doing the same movement, the same things. So in some aspects, dealing with this period, getting to know exact terms, exact processes, even if they are not part of the emancipatory vocabulary and they are more close to dictatorship of oppression, we can still learn from them in terms of position of the body, function of words, moments and distribution for visibility and invisibility. All this belongs to the world of creative process, art, but also violence and process that deal with changing. Okay, so I'm not going much further with this idea. Again, here I present this installation with two videos, and I called the two installations Ntimbe Caetano, but there's an old video in this installation that I did in 2014, and that's called Effects of Wording. And this video, I did it in reaction to the fact that in histories, you always written history considering the critical moments of an event. In the timeline, you always select the moment of crisis, like the riots, the killing, the process of reconciliation, the signing papers. But you never observe the process in slow steps, in the process of every day. What can you do every day? That also gives you access of the visibility of change. So I was very obsessed and very focused by this idea of radical pedagogy. Of course, it's not a new term. It comes from all this movement with pedagogy in the 60s. But I really like this idea, this contradictory idea in it, because it's pedagogy, so you do it every day. It's something that is slow, and it never aims a result that you can see immediately, but it's also radical. So radical, normally you observe it in action. So radical pedagogy, for me, turned into this motivation to search in these archives, in this process of this context of liberation, what could be the correspondence of this. And I actually found, well, many elements that would suit this idea. So again, around the video, the effects of wording, the images that we look at in the video are tutorials, literacy textbooks, images from archives in the US, in the Netherlands, and also in Mozambique, in Tanzania. You also see Super 8 film images took in the 60s around the Mozambique Institute in Dar es Salaam. The Mozambique Institute was the first school of Frelimo, and it was based in Dar es Salaam because, of course, you could not develop an educational project in the front zone. You had to be protected in the neighboring country. And that time, Tanzania was hosting many of the liberation movements, as you know. In this film also you hear some testimonies and references of the presence of Paulo Freire, which, as you know, is a famous pedagogue from Brazil, and he wrote Pedagogy of Oppressed, and in 1960s. And also he said this sentence that was also very inspiring for me, which was reading the world before reading the word. So he believed that the process of learning how to read a word will result better if you actually had a true connection with the word that this word would be in contact with. So this sounds a little bit like didactic, but in fact, what he says is that if reading or learning how to read is a way to be in the world, be aware of your place in the world. So he understood how strong and powerful could be the process of literacy in zones in Brazil, starting in Brazil, for example, in the favela, where we spot the word favela as the first word that would be developed to initiate this process, because everyone knew and had a place in the favela, maybe not in the city, but in the favela. So this was inspiring for me, just to know the fact that he was present, he visited in some strange circumstances. He was led to Bagamoyo, one of the second school of Frelimo in Tanzania. I liked also the fact that you can spot this in the video. So he didn't come to teach anything, because he, in contact with the students there, he just realized that what he has developed as a theory was already put in practice by these guerrilleiros, by these students that also went to the interior in the front zone to fight. So it was a theory and an action not separated in the same process. So he returned with the security and the confidence that his theory was good, and the guerrilleros had more confidence that what they were doing had a broad effect in other places, could be used in other situations, eventually in the future. So I want to show you a little bit. I'm not sure if you have seen all the video, but I will start with these images that also is in the video and also is in the boards outside the room. So here you see the second lesson of the textbook of 1972, just after Freire was in Bagamoyo. And this textbook was made by the students there and the teachers in group. So you can see at the left you have a camarada, which is a comrade, and you can see a man with a hoe that would help him to produce and eat from the land he cultivates. He has a weapon in his bag that would enable him to kill the enemy, and also a book in his hand, which is the sign for the literacy, the movement towards the future. I want to know how to read and write, because after this fight, I will continue and build up my country. So globally, this figure means the man, the emancipated man, which is the correspondence to the word comrade. At the right, you have machete. Do you say this in German also, no? Machete. That in Portuguese is katana. And the fact that they are both in the same lesson is not a casualty. I just want to tell you that I've learned there with the former teachers at the Bagamoyo school to read this applying the Paulo Freire's techniques. So I said before that he identified favela as the word that will be the favorite word to start to read and write. And here they consider the word camarade, because camarade is the concept that they wanted to spread among the population. Everyone should be able to do everything that this man is carrying in this figure. But camarade has a difficulty for the people in the north of Mozambique, which they can't speak and pronunciate the word, the letter R. So camarade is far away from what they could pronunciate easily. So they took the word katana, that is similar to camarade, and leads you to camarade the same way. So you will learn first using a word that has a direct contact with the population. Everyone knows and uses this instrument for cultivating, to eliminate the bush and be able to plant what to eat. And from the katana you can raise two camarades. So I told these stories to many people, even people from experts on Paulo Freire, and they were all very amazed by the fact that this has this combination and actually could work. So, but in fact, what I wanted to tell you is, like, when I start with this knowledge about Paulo Freire, I understood what he was saying, of course, about the before learning the word, you would have to be able to understand the world. But I started to also, by my experience on checking indexes in many archives, I start to believe myself that you could reverse this expression and say, if you get the right words, you can also understand the words behind. So that's why Effects of Wording is so focused on archives. I went to the Ford Foundation archive and checked what they had about the guerrilleiros, and they all suggested the word refugees, because they are poor people running away from their countries to Tanzania. They were refugees. So the US could actually imagine a way to help them, because they are victims of the oppressed colonizer. In the Netherlands, the situation was quite different. They developed this idea of solidarity based on the observation of these people being totally empowered. So they were inspired by them, and considered that someone that joins a liberation movement is in touch with his own future, his own capacity to change something. And arriving again to Mozambique, I started to look into the archives there, which are not of easy access. And I couldn't find really, among all the process of propaganda that was very strategic, very intelligent, I couldn't really grab this other word until I imagined that it was already inside these textbooks, the word for correspondent to actually what was the real aspect of what was happening inside the heads of all these people that wanted to change or were motivated to change by offering their own lives to the fight. In some ways, along with this research, I was dealing with some images from the Mozambique Institute that I want to make it clear now. So you're going to see with no sound. So I got in touch with someone that is a very important person now in Mozambique. And at that time, he, in Algeria, where he was also, how you say, politic refugee, he bought this Super 8 camera and back to Tanzania. Well, this is a very complex story. It's better not to move too much into it. But basically, the first time I saw these images, I was touched by the fact that they were so biographical. I sensed that they were like his own experience being recorded by his camera. It was with no sound. And but progressively, I started to, by the influence I was having with all these discoveries of the textbooks, I identify here many sequences where, in fact, even if the film is mute, you can sense that there's some words that come as to explain something that is happening, something that was more expressed, for example, in moments of pause in a flag, or in the fact that this young man is washing his clothes, because washing their own clothes is an act of self-discipline, of contact with his, taking care of himself. So perhaps, and many of these elements were touching something that could be called more like militant cinema than biographical or biopolitical cinema. So this scene of the theater confirmed it, because later on I discovered that what these kids are doing is enacting a Bertolt Brecht piece. And here, for example, you can observe the military camp where someone is taking a photo of the formateur, making clear that this is important, this is what's important to see. So basically, all the structure for the video has this background that I'm trying here to give you clues to discover militancy in biographical, what I thought it was a memory, individual memory, and a strange connection between the reading of these images with somehow what is expressed and can be read as a code in the textbooks. So, so this was in 2014, and for this exhibition, it was a little bit a difficult process, because I realized that this work was very much in contact with what the curators were asking, and but I wanted to somehow do a follow-up of this video, because this film was also made in a way that I could show it in Mozambique to people that are not so in touch with the culture of the visual or the cinema or even the montage. So I always feel that I should not do something ambiguous. I could also do something that was my first aim, but always observing these two ways of seeing the film. The film is also something that you tell the story of the Mozambique Institute, you tell the story of these young men that go to war and learn, and in some way they will be the future for the reconstruction of their own country. But you can also see it in these other, in the other ways, much more in contact with an essay film tradition. So again, for this exhibition, I wanted that. I wanted to give a new editing to this film without touching it in some way. So at the time I was dealing a lot with another research that had to do with the Maconde also, but as a sculpture. To make it clear, maybe, okay, so this you can see in the exhibition. So I was very much impressed by the fact that during the liberation movement, the guerrilleros that were Maconde and had talent to do sculpture, they produced sculpture expressly to sell them to art collectors coming from Europe, because with this money they could, of course, buy more weapons and warfare. And I found in the archive evidence of this contact, where the little statues that are these sculptures, they are very precious, and their value increased with the war, of course. They were presented to European collectors. One of these sculptures I met recently in the north of Mozambique, very near where he was born, near Moeda, and he developed a new technique, because the wood that was made, that served to be used in the sculpture, was disappearing, and they could not make any more with the same wood, because this sculpture has they have a long story of exploitation until very recent epoch. So, but I'm not going in that way. I'm going to stick in this woodcut. So I was dealing with the fact that many of these men that did that during the war still are dealing with wood, with sculpture, and in Lisbon I met someone that was actually someone that was born in the war zone and was taught by this man how to work with wood. So this is Ntaluma. Ntaluma is a Maconde sculptor, and I started to film him and visit his house. And it was very entertaining, because his work is to sculpture the wood, and then he sings and explains what he's singing, because I can't understand what he's saying in the songs. And suddenly he started to evoke the story of Ntimbe Caetano. And when he was doing the slogan, the chant, he could not do it if not moving his body in the way that you can see actually now in the images. So it was interesting for me the fact that Ntimbe Caetano, that you could basically express it as a slogan. Something is happening here. Well, let's keep it that way. I must focus on telling you this. For this video, I was inspired by this moment where Ntaluma really explained me that Ntimbe Caetano was associated with a choreography, an intense choreography. If you didn't do it well, you could be executed. Why? Because Ntimbe Caetano was a special call when there were popular trials in the village. So the people were chanting to everyone to gather around the center of the village, and they were hitting their foot on the ground with such a conviction to not to be seen as possible traitors. So you would repeat and the sentence and do with lots of intensity this movement against the ground if you will not want to be the next victim. Because the fact is that these trials, the main objective was to obviously create terror and make people very obedient in that context, not to go to the other side, that will be the Portuguese troops. Eventually, among the people that were chanting, one was picked, and someone would ask, is this man a traitor? And everyone would say, yes, he is, because of course they don't want to be the next, even if it was someone from the mother or father. This was super, we can't imagine today the suffering of these moments, the terror that would grow in that moment. Eventually this person had the approval of everyone as being a traitor and was immediately executed with lots of, for everyone to hear and see. So I try to, in this second video, to bring this idea that was missed in the first, where you can observe the words as something that will change, but also the movement of your body, the gestures that you repeat and make others see, also had an impact in what you think. Eventually, one and the other can't distinct. You can't actually imagine if a gesture that you repeat today is not conducting your thought and not the other way around. So just to close this, I went to the room and did a small video that I liked, and this has the effect that I wanted, as a naturalizing a kind of montage between the first one that you are seeing now and the second one, the Ntimbe Caetano. Okay. Thank you. So I'm sorry if this sounds like a conference, something. I imagine in my head that